Imagine sitting in a packed courtroom and watching the most powerful police chief in the county lean forward, lose control and scream, "I own you, pig," at one of his own officers while every camera in the room catches it. Drop a comment telling us what you think should happen when power turns into abuse. Because before this story is over, a judge with a voice barely above a whisper is going to say something so precise, so devastating, and so unforgettable that nobody in that courtroom will ever hear authority the same way again. And if you believe no badge should place anyone above the law, hit that subscribe button right now. If you've ever seen a bully hide behind a title, like this video, share this with someone who needs to see what real justice sounds like, because this wasn't just a hearing. This was the day a whole city watched a powerful man meet the truth. At 8:42 on a gray Tuesday morning, September 17, 2025, the air inside Courtroom 4B at the Kent County Superior Court Annex in Warwick, Rhode Island, felt heavier than rain. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The gallery benches were full before the clerk even called the case. Reporters from WPRI, local freelancers with shoulder-mounted cameras, retired officers in sport coats, and ordinary people from Eastborough crowded shoulder to shoulder, whispering under their breath. Everyone had heard the clip. Everyone knew the words. Everyone had come to see whether the law would blink. At the defense table sat Daniel Mercer, age 52, police chief of Eastborough for the last 7 years. 30 years in uniform total. Son of a steelworker from Cranston. Graduate of Roger Williams University. Decorated for bravery back in 2003 after pulling a 6-year-old boy from a house fire on Cedar Lane. He was 6'2", broad through the shoulders, silver threaded at both temples, clean-shaven, and dressed in a navy canali suit that probably cost more than most people in the courtroom made in 2 weeks. His Ferragamo loafers were polished to a mirror shine. His Rolex Submariner flashed every time he adjusted his cuff. He looked like the kind of man who had spent 2 decades walking into rooms expecting them to quiet down. Across from him sat Officer Louis Ortega, 29 years old, Eastborough Patrol, badge number 2714, first-generation Puerto Rican American, former high school wrestler, husband to a second-grade teacher named Marisol, father of a 3-year-old daughter who called his squad car Daddy's blue truck. His uniform was pressed but older, the fabric just starting to fade at the elbows. He wore a $40 Timex with a cracked face, and the kind of expression men get when they have spent weeks replaying one moment in their head and still can't believe it happened. Behind Ortega sat 3 civilians whose lives had been smashed together by one night on Post Road. Tasha Bell, 34, waitress at the Seabreeze Diner, wrist in a beige brace under the sleeve of a Target cardigan, a thin white scar running along her chin where she hit the pavement. Evelyn Price, 68, widow, retired school bus driver, her gray hair pinned carefully back, clutching a folder stuffed with repair estimates and dialysis appointment receipts. And Noah Benton, 17, a lifeguard with freckles across his nose and the tense posture of a teenager who had seen something adults kept telling him to forget. Presiding over it all was Judge Elena Marquez, 61, black robe, pearl earrings, reading glasses low on her nose, calm hands folded over a legal pad. She had served on the bench for 14 years and before that spent 19 as a public defender. She was known across the state for one habit more than any other. She never raised her voice. She never needed to. Lawyers said her quietest sentences hit harder than most judges shouting. Clerks said she could slice through lies like a paper cutter through bond stock. Bailiffs said she could silence a room faster than a gavel. When the clerk, Denise Hall, called case number KC 25CR 1184, the scrape of wooden benches stopped all at once. State of Rhode Island versus Daniel Mercer. Counts included misdemeanor assault, witness intimidation, misuse of public office, criminal mischief, and contempt related to conduct inside the courthouse after arraignment. Simplified for the cameras, but serious enough to end a career if the facts landed the wrong way. Serious enough to strip away the last layers of insulation power had built around him. Daniel Mercer had not come here expecting humiliation. He had come expecting containment. For the first week after the incident, that plan had almost worked. Because on June 28, 2025, at exactly 10:13 p.m., Mercer had not looked like a criminal. He had looked like the most protected man in Eastboro. He was off duty that night, driving a black 2023 GMC Yukon Denali North on Post Road after leaving a fundraiser at the Harbor Club, a private waterfront venue with white umbrellas, bourbon flights, and a mayor who liked to be photographed with uniforms. The event had raised money for a youth boxing program. Mercer had spoken briefly on stage. He'd shaken hands. He'd accepted applause. He'd sipped 2 old fashions, maybe 3, depending on whose memory you trusted. He'd gotten into the Yukon alone. 10 minutes later, he swung too wide into the small lot beside the Seabreeze Diner. That lot was cramped on a good day. On a humid Saturday night with tourists still drifting back from the shoreline, it was chaos. A silver 2014 Honda Civic belonging to Evelyn Price was parked crooked near the curb. Tasha Bell was carrying 2 bags of trash to the dumpster near the alley. Noah Benton was standing by his friend's blue Corolla, looking down at his phone. And Officer Luis Ortega, working a traffic detail 2 blocks away near a road resurfacing project, was just finishing a call. Mercer's Yukon clipped the rear quarter panel of Evelyn's Civic hard enough to shove it 6 feet sideways. The Honda lurched, the back tire jumped the curb, and Tasha spun toward the sound just as Mercer reversed without checking his blind spot. The SUV bumper caught her hip. She went down on one knee, then both hands, then her chin struck the asphalt. Noah shouted first. Tasha screamed second. And then Mercer got out. What happened in the next 6 minutes was the reason Courtroom 4B was overflowing now. If you think rank excuses rage, tell us why in the comments. If you think the camera changes everything, stay with this story. Because the first thing Chief Mercer said that night was, "Is anyone hurt?" It was, "Call an ambulance." It wasn't even my fault. It was, "Who parked this junk in a live lane?" He said it loud, sharp, angry, like the damage had been done to him. Noah would later tell the court he thought the man stepping out of the Yukon looked like somebody used to getting out of trouble before other people even knew there was trouble. Mercer's tie was loosened. His white dress shirt was open at the collar. He smelled like cedar cologne and whiskey. Tasha was trying to stand. Blood was bright on her chin. Evelyn hadn't even reached the lot yet. She was still inside the diner paying for lemon pie to take home after her treatment the next morning. Ortega arrived 30 seconds later when the dispatch call came through as a vehicle strike with injury. He jogged into the lot expecting a tourist fender bender. Instead, he saw his own chief, one hand on the Yukon door, jaw clenched, staring down at an injured waitress while a teenager yelled that he had hit her. Ortega froze for half a second. Every officer in Eastboro knew Mercer's moods. The chief ran the department with immaculate inspections, impossible standards, and a philosophy that had made him famous in city council meetings. Fear keeps a department sharp. Publicly, he called it discipline. Privately, people called it Mercer weather. When he was calm, everything ran. When he was angry, everyone braced. Ortega clicked his body cam on before he spoke. That tiny decision would change everything. At 10:15 p.m., according to the timestamp the whole courtroom would eventually watch, Ortega stepped forward and said, "Chief, I need you to stay by the vehicle. EMS is coming." Mercer turned his head slowly. The body cam caught every detail. The redness in his cheeks, the glassiness in his eyes, the disbelief that anyone below his rank had given him an instruction in public. Then Mercer laughed. Not a happy laugh, not embarrassed, the kind of laugh a man gives when he thinks what he's hearing is beneath him. He took one step toward Ortega and said, "You need to remember who signs your schedule." Tasha was groaning behind them. Noah was shouting that the woman was bleeding. A cook from the diner had come out the back door. And still Mercer's first instinct was control. Ortega tried again. "Chief, please, we have a civilian injury. I need you right here." That was when Mercer jabbed a finger into Ortega's chest, hard enough for the camera to jerk, and said the line that would lead every local newscast by morning. "I own you, pig." The gasps in the courtroom hadn't happened yet. Those would come later, but that was the line. Those were the words, spoken by a police chief to one of his own officers while an injured woman knelt on asphalt and a teenager recorded from 15 feet away. Noah's video was shaky. He never meant to be a witness. He was 17. He was scared. He had started recording because his older cousin once told him if something feels wrong around power, document it. That clip, 14 seconds long, posted anonymously to a neighborhood Facebook group at 12:07 a.m. By sunrise, it had been mirrored across 3 platforms, ripped, reposted, subtitled, slowed down, and debated by thousands. By noon, millions would have seen at least part of it. But the viral clip wasn't the whole story. That was the problem for Mercer, and that was why so many people were in court. Because there was body cam, there was surveillance, there was dash cam, there were reports that didn't match each other, there were calls made from inside City Hall before midnight, there were 2 officers whose statements changed, then changed back, there was a deleted audio file that wasn't fully deleted, there was a letter no one expected, and there was one courthouse hallway camera that captured something even more damaging than the original incident. By the time the clerk finished reading the counts, everyone in the room knew this was no longer about one insult. This was about what happened when a man built on command was forced to listen. Mercer's attorney, Leonard Pike, rose first. Pike was 57, tan from golf, hair silver and controlled, red silk tie, cuff links shaped like tiny gavels. He had defended judges, contractors, and 3 state senators. He specialized in making ugly things sound technical. He called the incident an emotionally charged misunderstanding following a low-speed accident. He called the video fragmentary. He called Mercer a decorated public servant experiencing acute personal strain. He emphasized the chief had no prior criminal record. He suggested the phrase heard on the video could have been, "I know you, kid," distorted by traffic noise. Half the gallery rolled their eyes at once. Judge Marquez didn't. She just wrote something down. Then the prosecutor stood. Assistant Attorney General Asha Whitmore was 38, sharp-eyed, charcoal suit, no wasted movement. She had grown up in Pawtucket, put herself through Brown on scholarships, and had a reputation for arguing like she was stitching a wound shut. Not flashy, precise. Her voice carried without pushing. "This case," she said, "is not about a man having a bad night. It is about a public official who used rank as a weapon, used fear as leverage, and then attempted to make evidence bend around him." You could feel the room lean in. "Today," she continued, "the court will see not one clip but a sequence. The state will show what happened before the insult, after the insult, and in the days that followed. And when that sequence is complete, the issue will become very simple. Does authority excuse intimidation, or does it make accountability more urgent?" That line landed. Even Mercer stopped shifting papers. Judge Marquez looked over her glasses. "Call your first witness." Asha Whitmore called Luis Ortega. Ortega walked to the stand with both shoulders tight. He took the oath, sat, adjusted the microphone once, and looked nowhere near Mercer. His wife Marisol was in the back row wearing a cream blouse and holding a tissue she hadn't used yet. She watched him the way people watch someone crossing a frozen lake, praying the ice holds. Whitmore eased him in gently at first. Name, age, assignment, years with the department, then she moved closer. "Officer Ortega, had you known Chief Mercer long before June 28th? "Yes, ma'am, since I graduated the academy." "Did you admire him?" A pause. "Yes." That surprised people. You could hear it. Whitmore asked why. Ortega swallowed. Because when I was 13, my father got robbed outside the bodega where he worked. Chief Mercer was a sergeant then. He found the guy in 2 days and walked my mother through the report himself. He told her, "Nobody gets to make your family feel small." I remembered that. For the first time all morning, Mercer looked up at him fully. That memory hung there for a second, uncomfortable and human and dangerous, because it reminded everyone the man on trial had not always been only the worst thing he'd done. Then Whitmore asked what changed. Ortega inhaled through his nose, power without anybody checking it. Silence. Share this with someone who needs to hear that sentence, because everybody in that courtroom knew it didn't just apply to one chief, or one town, or one badge. Ortega described the dispatch call, the lot, Tasha on the ground, Mercer's tone, the smell of alcohol. Pike objected to the alcohol characterization, sustained in part. Marquez limited him to sensory observations. Ortega adjusted. I smelled what I believed to be liquor. He described telling Mercer to remain by the vehicle. He described Mercer stepping toward him. He described the finger in his chest. He described hearing the exact words. "I own you, pig." Pike got up for cross and tried to peel the moment apart. "Officer Ortega, your body camera was pointed downward for portions of the exchange, correct?" "Yes." "So we do not see my client's lips form every syllable." "We hear him. We hear what you say you heard. We hear what he said." Pike smiled like he'd been waiting for that. "Officer, are you angry with Chief Mercer?" "Yes." The gallery stiffened. "Why?" "Because I respected him." That answer took the air out of Pike's setup. He shifted. "Isn't it true you were passed over for a specialized traffic unit slot last year?" "Yes." "And you filed no grievance?" "No." "Could resentment be affecting your interpretation of an already chaotic moment?" "No, sir." "How can you be so certain?" Ortega finally looked at Mercer. "Because I know what it feels like when a man who trained you to speak for victims looks at an injured woman and chooses his own ego instead." A woman in the gallery whispered, "Damn." Judge Marquez didn't correct her. She was listening too closely. Whitmore moved the body cam footage into evidence. The monitor flickered on. Every neck in the room turned. The footage opened in motion, streetlights reflecting on wet pavement, siren wash, Ortega's breathing, then the lot, the Yukon, Tasha on one knee, Noah shouting off-screen, Mercer pivoting, face flushed. It is one thing to hear about anger. It is another to watch it move. On the big screen, Mercer looked larger than he had at the defense table. His shoulders filled the frame. His jaw was tight. His voice came through clearer than anyone expected. Not perfect, but clear enough. When Ortega said, "Chief, I need you to stay by the vehicle," Mercer's reply cut through the speakers. "You need to remember who signs your schedule." You could hear Tasha crying. You could hear Noah saying, "Lady, don't move, don't move." Then the finger to the chest. Then the line, "I own you, pig." No distortion, no ambiguity, no saving reinterpretation. Gasps broke across the courtroom in waves. Somebody in the back let out a breath like they'd been punched. Denise Hall, the clerk, froze with her pen in midair. Marisol Ortega covered her mouth. Evelyn Price closed her eyes. Mercer himself didn't move, but the color in his face changed. It wasn't shame yet, more like fury that the audio was better than he had hoped. The video kept going. Ortega backed half a step and said, "Chief, you need to calm down." Mercer answered, "Turn that camera off." Whitmore paused the screen. Pike stood instantly. "Objection. We dispute the audibility of the final statement." Judge Marquez replayed it. "Turn that camera off." This time even Pike didn't speak. Whitmore turned to the witness. "Did you turn it off?" "No." "Why not?" Because an injured civilian was on the ground, the chief was escalating, and I didn't know what would happen next. Whitmore nodded once. What did happen next? Ortega said, Chief Mercer told me if that footage ever caused him a problem, I'd be parking abandoned vehicles behind municipal storage by sunrise. Pike objected again. Hearsay, Whitmore responded, party admission overruled. The room got quieter. Then Whitmore said the words everyone had been waiting for without knowing it. Officer Ortega, were you the only camera rolling that night? He blinked once. No. Leonard Pike turned slowly. Mercer's fingers tightened around his pen. Whitmore faced the bench. The state would now like to introduce footage from the Seabreeze Diner exterior surveillance camera, recovered pursuant to warrant from the diner's cloud backup. That was the first revelation that changed everything. Because it meant Mercer hadn't just underestimated one officer. He'd underestimated the whole moment. He had walked into an ordinary parking lot assuming the world would stay unwitnessed. It never did. And just when the defense realized that, the courtroom lights dimmed again. The diner camera angle was higher and wider, grainier but broad enough to show the full lot. From above, the Yukon's movement looked even worse. You saw the swing, the impact with Evelyn's Honda, the reverse, Tasha stepping into frame, the hit at her hip, her body folding, Noah jumping backward, a cook bursting out the rear door, Mercer emerging from the vehicle with a frustrated throw of the door, not a rush to help. Then, from 20 feet away, Ortega entering at speed. No audio this time, just motion, but motion can accuse in ways words cannot. Whitmore let the silence sit for a beat after the clip ended. Then she asked, Officer Ortega, before you gave Chief Mercer any instruction, did he kneel to check Ms. Bell's condition? No. Did he call 911? No. Did he ask if Ms. Price's vehicle had been struck? No. What did he do first? He got angry. Whitmore sat down. And for the first time that morning, Mercer leaned toward Pike and whispered something that made the lawyer's mouth flatten. Everyone in the room knew the defense had expected to challenge memory. They had not expected choreography. Like this video, if you believe a wide camera angle has ended more lies than speeches ever could. And stay with this story, because what happened next didn't weaken the state's case. It made it personal. The next witness was Tasha Bell. Tasha walked with a slight hitch in her left side that she tried to hide and failed. She wore black slacks, flat shoes, and a pale blue blouse buttoned all the way to the top despite the warmth in the room. Her hair was tied back. The scar on her chin looked newer under courtroom light than at H. Add in the photos filed as exhibits. Whitmore asked how long she'd worked at the Seabreeze. 9 years. What were you doing when the defendant's vehicle entered the lot? Taking out trash and broken down boxes. Did you see the SUV before it hit Ms. Price's car? No, I heard tires first. How did you get injured? Tasha's hand went to her brace. When the car he hit moved, I turned. Then his SUV backed up and the bumper caught me right here. She touched her hip. I fell on my hands and face. What injuries did you sustain? Bruised hip, hairline fracture in my wrist, 7 stitches in my chin, physical therapy for 6 weeks, and I still can't stand on that side too long without it hurting. How much work did you miss? Almost a month. How much income? Tips included, around $3,800. Tasha tried to keep her voice even. She almost managed it until Whitmore asked a small question. What did you need that money for? Tasha looked down. My son's asthma medication. There it was, another layer. Not just pain, consequence. Not just a fall, a family already running thin. The gallery shifted. People stopped seeing one injured waitress and started seeing a single mother standing at a pharmacy counter doing math she shouldn't have had to do. Whitmore moved in carefully. After you were hit, did the defendant come to help you? No. Did he apologize? No. What did he say? Tasha blinked hard. He said, "Stay down for a second and let us handle this internally." Pike was up. Objection, hearsay. Overruled. Tasha continued, voice shaking now. I remember thinking internally. I was bleeding in a parking lot. What does internally even mean when you can't feel your hand? That line landed hard. Pike crossed her gently at first, maybe hoping compassion would expose inconsistency. It didn't. He asked whether Mercer might have been in shock. Tasha said shock doesn't stop people from seeing blood. He asked whether the impact on her was glancing. Tasha said glancing didn't keep her son up at night asking if she was going to need surgery. He asked whether she had posted online about wanting Mercer fired before speaking to investigators. She said yes. Why? Pike asked, thinking he'd caught emotion instead of fact. Because he acted like hurting me was an inconvenience to him. No one mistook that for exaggeration. Then came Evelyn Price. If Tasha brought the room pain, Evelyn brought dignity. She walked slowly, shoulders straight, wearing a navy cardigan over a floral blouse and white sneakers that squeaked on the floor. She carried her folder to the stand and thanked the bailiff when he moved the chair closer. She had driven a bus for 31 years. She spoke with the crisp rhythm of someone who had spent decades telling children to sit down and speak clearly. Whitmore asked about her Honda Civic. 216,000 miles, Evelyn said. Ran better than my nephew's BMW. A few people laughed softly. Then Whitmore asked why the car mattered so much. Because on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays it took me to dialysis at 6:30 in the morning, and after the crash, I had no car for 12 days. How did you get to treatment? Evelyn opened the folder and pulled out receipts. Neighbors, a church van twice, one ride I missed and had to reschedule because nobody could take me in time. Did the defendant contact you? No. Did anyone from his office contact you? Not until after the video went viral. That sentence stung in a different way. It suggested silence until pressure, concern delayed until exposure. Whitmore asked if Evelyn had ever met Mercer before the crash. Yes, he spoke at my grandson's middle school once. How would you describe him then? She sighed, like a man who knew exactly how to sound honorable when children were listening. You could feel that one spread through the room. Pike tried to soften it. He asked whether city insurance eventually covered the repairs. Evelyn said yes, after paperwork and after her niece raised a fuss. He asked whether Mercer had personally spoken to her after counsel was retained. She said yes. What did he say? He said he was sorry the situation had become public. The gallery murmured. Pike grimaced. He hadn't known she'd phrase it that way. Judge Marquez made a note. Then came Noah Benton. Teenage witnesses can either crumble or tell the truth, so simply, it cuts deeper than adults ever could. Noah did the second. He wore a charcoal hoodie under a borrowed blazer that was too big in the shoulders. His blonde hair kept falling in his eyes. He looked terrified until Whitmore asked if he knew why he had been called. Then his posture changed. Because fear is one thing, being dismissed is another. And Noah had spent the last 2 months hearing grown men imply he misunderstood what he saw. He described the crash, Tasha falling, Mercer stepping out, the yelling, recording because it felt like everyone else was all read. Why scared of him? Pike asked if he disliked police. Noah said no, he wanted to become a firefighter. Pike asked if he had edited the video before posting. Noah said no, and the metadata confirmed it. Pike asked if online attention made him feel important. Noah leaned toward the microphone. My video got attention because a police chief hurt somebody and then talked like he could decide what reality was. That's why. Even Judge Marquez looked up a little faster at that. Whitmore asked one more question. Mr. Benton, has this incident affected the way you feel when you see police officers now? Noah swallowed. Yeah. How? He glanced at Mercer and then away. I used to think uniforms meant somebody was there to help. Now I think it depends who's inside. The courtroom went still in a way no camera clip could create. Because that was the real damage, wasn't it? Not just a dented car. Not just stitches. Not just a threat caught on audio. It was corrosion. One public act of contempt spreading distrust through people who had done nothing to deserve it. And then, just when it seemed the state had already built more than enough, Whitmore said, "The state calls Lieutenant Hannah Sloan." That was when Mercer's face truly changed. Because civilians can describe harm, officers can recount misconduct. But when internal affairs walks in, the whole system starts testifying against itself. Lieutenant Hannah Sloan was 44, short dark hair, gray suit, no jewelry except a wedding band. She worked professional standards for Eastboro and had spent most of her career avoiding politics by being ruthlessly factual. Everybody in county law enforcement knew her. Nobody described her as dramatic, which meant when she took the stand, even the reporters sat up straighter. Whitmore asked whether Sloan had reviewed incident reports related to June 28. Yes. How many initial versions of Officer Ortega's report existed? 2. How many versions of backup officer Keisha Dunn's report existed? 2. Why? Because both officers were asked to revise language. Asked by whom? Sloan looked at Mercer. Deputy Chief Ron Heller, after a phone call with Chief Mercer. Pike objected. Foundation. Whitmore laid it. Sloan had reviewed the call logs and interviewed Heller under Garrity protections. Overruled. Whitmore continued. What language was changed? Sloan opened a binder. Officer Ortega's original report described the defendant as displaying signs of intoxication and making a threat regarding assignment retaliation. The revised version removed both references. Officer Dunn's original report described hearing the defendant say, quote, "Kill the camera." The revised version stated only that the defendant appeared agitated. The room erupted in whispers. Judge Marquez rapped once with the gavel. Silence. Whitmore's tone never shifted. Lieutenant Sloan, did you recover any deleted files? Yes, from a department-issued phone used by Deputy Chief Heller. What was deleted? A voice memo sent to him at 11:08 p.m. on June 28th. Who sent it? Chief Mercer. Pike was standing now, objecting before the answer finished. Privilege, chain of custody, prejudice. But Whitmore had prepared for all of it. The memo had been recovered via warrant. The privilege argument failed because it was an administrative, not legal, communication. Judge Marquez allowed it. Whitmore turned to the bench. Your Honor, with the court's permission, the state would play State's Exhibit 19. The speakers crackled. Mercer's own voice filled the room, lower and rougher than in court, but unmistakable. Ron, it's Dan. Get ahead of this. Ortega's trying to be a hero. Bell's fine. Price will get a bumper. Tell Dunn to clean her report. No mention of alcohol. No mention of the camera line. We're not letting a parking lot circus turn into a career hit. Call me when it's handled. When the audio ended, nobody spoke. Nobody. Not the gallery, not Pike, not even Mercer. Because there it was, not panic, not confusion, strategy. That was the second revelation that changed everything. And Judge Marquez still hadn't said much at all. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever watched a powerful person fall apart the second receipts show up. Because the next part didn't just hurt Mercer's defense. It exposed the one thing he feared more than punishment, being seen clearly. Pike asked for a brief recess, denied. So he did the only thing left. He tried to humanize. On redirect of no one, on the defense case, Pike called Daniel Mercer himself. That decision surprised some people. It terrified others. A defendant with Mercer's temper getting on the stand after multiple damaging videos and an incriminating memo. Risky didn't begin to cover it, but Pike had likely concluded the paper case was dead. If there was any path left, it ran through personality, through the old hero story, through the parts of Mercer's life that once made people forgive him before. Ray, he asked. Mercer took the oath and sat. Up close, the cameras caught what the room had started to notice. The tiny tick in his jaw, the way his right hand flattened every piece of paper before touching it, the slight stiffness in his neck when anyone mentioned June 28. Men like Mercer often spend years confusing control with strength. Put them under lights, and the difference starts to show. Pike led him through biography first. Childhood in Cranston, father on steel crews, mother at a dentist's office, first in family to finish college, joined Eastboro Police at 22, worked narcotics, then patrol supervision, then command, lost his wife Caroline to pancreatic cancer in February 2024 after 17 months of treatment, stopped sleeping, took on more work, buried himself in the job. That drew sympathy, real sympathy, you could feel it. Grief explains nothing, but it changes how people hear a voice. Pike asked Chief Mercer, "Were you drinking the night of June 28th?" Mercer took a breath. "I had 2 drinks over several hours." "Were you intoxicated?" "No." "Did you intend to injure Ms. Bell?" "Absolutely not." "Did you strike Ms. Price's vehicle?" "Yes." "Why didn't you immediately render aid?" He paused too long. "I was disoriented, I heard shouting, I made bad decisions." "Did you say, 'I own you, pig'?" Mercer looked at Ortega. "I said something shameful. I was angry and humiliated in public. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but I've heard the recording." Pike knew that was the best he was going to get. Then he asked the question, designed to reclaim the whole room. "Chief Mercer, have you served your community with honor for most of your life?" Mercer answered quickly, "Yes." Pike nodded, "Are you a monster?" Before Mercer could answer, Whitmore said, "Objection." Sustained. But the question had already done its work. It hung there, emotional and unanswerable. Because almost nobody is one thing. That is what makes stories like this hard. That is what makes justice harder. Mercer eventually said, "I made serious mistakes. I'm not proud of who I was that night." Then Whitmore stood for cross. And the temperature dropped. "Chief Mercer," she said, "do you agree that command responsibility carries a higher burden of conduct?" "Yes." "So if a patrol officer used the phrase you used on June 28th, would you discipline him?" "Yes." "If a patrol officer struck a civilian with his vehicle, failed to render aid, and told witnesses to handle it internally, would you discipline him?" "Yes." "If he instructed others to remove references to alcohol and threats from reports, would you seek his termination?" Mercer hesitated. "Yes." Whitmore let that settle. "So the only remaining issue is whether you want this court to apply to you the same standard you enforced on others." Mercer shifted. "I want the full context considered." "We are considering it." Whitmore stepped closer. "Did you send the voice memo to Deputy Chief Heller?" "Yes." "Why?" "I was trying to prevent rumors from destroying the department." "The department," Whitmore repeated, "not the truth." "I believed the situation was spiraling." "Because you had created it." Pike objected, argumentative. Marquez overruled. Whitmore continued, "Chief Mercer, did you apologize to Ms. Bell at the scene?" "No." "To Ms. Price?" "No." "To Officer Ortega?" "No." "In the 48 hours after the incident, did you contact either civilian victim before the video spread online?" "No." After the video spread, did you call the mayor? Yes. Before you called Ms. Bell? Mercer's silence answered first. Then he said, yes. That might have been the ugliest fact of the morning because it was so small and so revealing. Instinct, priority, the hierarchy of concern written in one phone log. Whitmore lowered her voice. Chief Mercer, when Officer Ortega told you to remain by the vehicle, what did you feel? Mercer stared straight ahead, disrespected. There it was. Not alarm, not guilt, not fear for the injured, disrespected. Whitmore didn't even need to look at the jury box. There wasn't one. The whole courtroom had just become its own conscience. And that feeling, she said, mattered more to you in that moment than the people you harmed. Mercer clenched his jaw. No. Then, why did your first acts protect rank instead of victims? He had no answer that didn't sound like confession. He tried anyway. I spent 30 years holding lines. In 1 second everything was chaos. I reacted badly. Whitmore's reply came like a blade laid flat on a table. No, Chief, you reacted naturally. That is why we are here. You could hear pens stop moving. That was a shareable quote if there ever was one. Mercer leaned back as if distance could help him. Whitmore took one more step. Did you approach Officer Ortega in the courthouse hallway this morning before proceedings began? Pike snapped his head up. He hadn't seen that coming. Mercer said, I spoke to H. I.M. Did you tell him, quote, you can still fix this? Mercer said nothing. Whitmore turned to the bench. The state seeks admission of courthouse security footage from 8:31 a.m. today. Now even the reporters looked stunned. Something had happened this morning, in the building, before the hearing. Judge Marquez nodded once. The monitor lit up again. The hallway camera had no audio, but angle and body language can be enough. It showed Ortega standing near the vending alcove by Courtroom 4B, coffee in one hand, notes in the other. Mercer approached with Pike several feet behind. Pike stopped to take a call. Mercer kept walking. He closed the distance. Too close. He leaned in until Ortega had nowhere to go but the cinderblock wall. Mercer spoke into his face for several seconds. Ortega didn't move. Mercer tapped the folder in Ortega's hand. Then he straightened and walked away. Whitmore said, the audio is from a directional ceiling microphone at the security desk. She played it. Mercer's voice came through low and dangerous. You can still fix this. Tell them you misheard me. Tell them you were amped up. Don't make me bury your career for my bad night. Ortega's reply was almost a whisper. You already tried. Mercer, careful. Then footsteps. The screen went dark. That was the third revelation. And it didn't just make Mercer look guilty. It made him look unchanged. Not remorseful, not reflective, operational. The courtroom had moved past disappointment into something colder. Even Pike looked beaten for a moment. Judge Marquez removed her glasses and set them on the bench. When she spoke, her voice was softer than usual, which somehow made everyone straighten. Mr. Pike, does your client wish to continue testifying? Pike conferred urgently with Mercer. Mercer's nostrils flared. His lips pulled tight. Every instinct in him seemed to be screaming to fight, to dominate, to push. Finally, Pike stood. No further testimony, Your Honor. But the day was not done. Because Asha Whitmore had one more witness, and this one would change the emotional center of the whole case. She called Riley Mercer. A visible ripple passed through the room. Mercer turned so fast his chair legs scraped. Riley Mercer was 19, a sophomore nursing student at the University of Rhode Island, with her mother's dark hair cut at the shoulders and her father's jawline turned fragile by stress. She wore jeans, a black blazer and white sneakers that looked too young for the gravity of the room. In her hand was a folded letter. Pike objected immediately. Relevance. Surprise. Whitmore responded that the witness had voluntarily requested to address the court on character and had information related to post-incident conduct and mitigation. Judge Marquez allowed limited examination. Riley sat. Her hands trembled, but her eyes didn't. Whitmore asked if she loved her father. Riley answered yes. That single word changed the room. Because suddenly, this was not just public disgrace. It was private wreckage in public light. Whitmore asked if she had watched the videos from June 28. Yes. What did you think? Riley's voice thinned for half a beat, then steadied. I thought the man on those videos was my father after he forgot how to grieve. Mercer looked down. Whitmore asked if Riley had written a letter to the court. She had. The judge allowed her to read it. Riley unfolded the page. You could hear the paper. When my mom got sick, she read, my dad became the strongest person in the room. That's what everybody said. He worked all day, slept in a hospital chair, learned every medication, argued with insurance, and still ironed his own uniform at 5 in the morning. People called him a rock. But after she died, he took that same hardness everywhere. Home, work, everywhere. He stopped being sad where people could see it. He became angry instead. She stopped and swallowed. I am not here to excuse what he did. I am here because if this court only punishes him without forcing him to face what he became, he will learn nothing except how to feel sorry for himself. My father always taught me that a person proves character by how they act when they are embarrassed. On that night, he failed his own lesson. Mercer's face had gone pale. Riley kept reading. He did not just crash into a car. He did not just hurt a woman. He did not just threaten an officer. He taught a whole town that power might matter more than truth. If you show him mercy, please make it the kind that requires work, not the kind that lets him tell himself he got through one more scandal. By the time she finished, even reporters had stopped typing. No one in that courtroom would ever forget the look on Mercer's face when his own daughter handed his mythology back to him in pieces. This was the emotional breakdown point the case had been circling. And yet the biggest explosion still hadn't happened. Drop a comment telling us whether Riley should have testified, because in that courtroom, half the people were thinking she saved her father, and the other half were thinking she was the first person who finally stopped protecting him. Judge Marquez asked if Mercer wished to confer further with counsel. He said no too quickly, too sharply, the old reflex coming back, the reflex that said emotion is weakness, control is survival, volume is advantage. Then Judge Marquez did something unexpected. She asked Ortega to return to the stand briefly. Whitmore said this related to victim impact and possible resolution. Ortega sat again, looking confused. Officer Ortega, Marquez said, the court understands you are a central victim of the intimidation charge. If sentence becomes necessary today, what would accountability look like to you? Ortega glanced at Mercer. For a second you could see the younger version of him, the academy graduate who once admired the chief, the kid whose family had been helped by the man now on trial, the part of him that still hated how much this hurt. Finally he answered. Consequences, he said, real ones. What kind? No badge, no command, no chance to tell himself this was media spin. He drew a breath, but not revenge. That word changed the room again. Explain, the judge said. Ortega's eyes were wet now, but he didn't hide it. When I was 13, he told my mom nobody gets to make your family feel small. Then he spent years making a whole department feel small whenever he needed control. I don't need him crushed. I need him unable to keep doing that. Mercer stared at him. Ortega added quietly, and I need him to say what he did, out loud. There it was. Not just punishment, recognition. Not just a sentence, truth spoken in the right direction. Pike whispered urgently to Mercer. Mercer shook him off. And then at 1:17 p.m., after 6 hours of testimony, exhibits, whispers, silence, tears, strategy, and the slow stripping away of excuses, Judge Marquez announced she was prepared to rule on the pending motions and proceed. That was when Daniel Mercer finally broke the one rule every experienced lawyer drills into every powerful client in crisis. He let his ego talk before his counsel could. He half rose from the defense table and said, "This entire thing has turned into a circus." Judge Marquez looked at him. Mercer kept going. "You've got a diner camera, a kid with a phone, officers with agendas, and now my own daughter dragged in here like this. I have given 30 years to public safety. 30 years. I built that department. I carried dead kids out of wrecks. I buried officers. I sat with mothers at 3 a.m. and now I'm supposed to be lectured by people who have never worn the weight." Pike whispered, "Dan, sit down." He didn't. He turned toward Ortega, who was still near the stand, and pointed. "You," Mercer snapped, voice cracking with fury, "I made you. I put you on night traffic because you couldn't handle pressure. I covered for your mistakes, and this is how you repay me." Ortega said nothing. Mercer took a step forward. "I own your file, I own your future, I own." He stopped only because the last word came out as a raw scream. "You pig!" The courtroom exploded. Gasps, shouts, benches creaking, Denise Hall knocking over her water, one reporter dropping a pen, Marisol Ortega standing before she realized she had, Bailiff Calvin Reed moving instantly between Mercer and the witness stand, Pike grabbing Mercer's sleeve, Riley Mercer covering her face, Tasha Bell frozen, Noah Benton wide-eyed like he had just watched the internet happen in real time. And through all of it, one sound cut the chaos in half. Not a yell. A single gavel strike. Judge Marquez did not stand. She did not scream back. She did not posture. She waited exactly long enough for the room to hear itself, and then she said, in a voice so calm it felt almost impossible, "Mr. Mercer, the day you confuse leadership with ownership is the day you become dangerous." Everything stopped. That was the line. That was the response people would clip, subtitle, repeat, and quote for months. But she wasn't done. You do not own officers. You do not own victims. You do not own witnesses. You do not own truth. Authority is borrowed. Character is owned. And today, with the whole room watching, you have shown which one you neglected. No one moved. Mercer's chest was rising hard now, but the anger had changed shape. This wasn't domination anymore. It was exposure. The worst thing for a man like him. Judge Marquez turned to the bailiff. "Mr. Reed, have the defendant seated." Mercer sat. The judge continued. "Let the record reflect that the defendant has repeated, in open court, the central threatening language at issue in this case. Let the record further reflect that this outburst occurred moments after the court extended procedural patience and asked targeted questions designed to assess remorse." Then she looked directly at Mercer. The loudest man in the room is usually losing. Another quote. Another S. And tense the internet would eat alive. Pike tried to speak. "Your Honor, my client is under extraordinary emotional strain." Marquez cut him off with a glance. So were the civilians he hit. So was the officer he threatened. So is every public servant who somehow manages not to weaponize that strain. Nobody in the gallery breathed wrong. This was the climax everybody came for, but it didn't feel like spectacle. It felt like a ledger finally balancing in public. Judge Marquez asked Mercer one question. "Do you wish to say anything now that resembles accountability?" He stared at the table, at his watch, at nothing. Then, in a voice stripped of command for the first time all day, he said, "I don't know how to do this." It was such a human sentence that people almost forgot who had said it. Marquez answered, "Then start by not lying." Mercer swallowed. I said it, he whispered. Louder. I said it, his voice shook. I said, I own you, pig. And I hit the car. And I didn't help her. Tasha Bell cried silently. And I tried to change the reports. And Mercer's shoulders gave once, just once, but enough. I cared more about what it would do to me than what I did to them. There it was. The moment of realization. The sentence truth had been dragging out of him since the morning began. Riley Mercer began to cry too. Judge Marquez let the silence sit. Then she said something no one expected after a confession like that. Good, now we can discuss whether you deserve only punishment or whether you are still capable of repair. That was the unexpected turn around the 7,000 word mark the room never saw coming. Because after all the outrage, all the exposure, all the satisfaction of watching arrogance collapse, the judge pivoted towards something harder than humiliation. Responsibility with purpose. Mercer looked up stunned. Asha Whitmore looked surprised too, though less so. She knew Marquez's reputation. The judge believed in accountability that left scars and work, not just headlines. Marquez reviewed the legal findings quickly. Based on the evidence and Mercer's admissions, the court found sufficient basis on the charged counts. Sentencing would be immediate under the agreed misdemeanor framework, subject to conditions and referral consequences already outlined by counsel. Simplified procedure, but the sentence itself would matter. Before imposing it, Judge Marquez invited final statements. Whitmore stood first. The state asks for a sentence that reflects three realities, she said. First, the civilian harm was real. Second, the intimidation was real. Third, the abuse of rank magnifies rather than mitigates. We ask for supervised probation, restitution in full, mandatory public office resignation as a negotiated collateral term, community service in direct service to those harmed by violence and trauma, counseling, and a period of incarceration suspended on strict conditions. The public must see that leadership failure at this level has consequence. Pike pleaded for mercy. No jail, medical grief counseling, years of service, a life unraveling after personal tragedy. He emphasized Riley's letter. He emphasized that Mercer had finally admitted the truth. He emphasized shame already endured. Then Judge Marquez did something that no one, not even Whitmore, seemed to know was coming. She reached for an envelope that had been on her bench since late morning. I have one additional letter, she said. It was hand-delivered to Chambers at 11:40 a.m. by a chaplain from St. Matthew's Medical Center. I am admitting it for sentencing only. Mercer looked confused. The judge opened it. It is from Officer Samuel Green, retired, Mr. Mercer's former field training officer. Now Mercer looked scared. Marquez read aloud. Judge, I trained Daniel Mercer when he was 22. He was hungry, proud, and too eager to prove he could command a room. I told him something on his first midnight shift. If respect has to be threatened, it was never respect. He wrote it in his notebook. I know because I made every rookie carry one. If he has forgotten that lesson, remind him. If he remembers it and ignored it, punish him harder. But if there is any version of that young officer still left, don't let him escape into self-pity. Make him serve people without rank. Mercer closed his eyes. That letter was the bridge. Not an excuse, a mirror. The room felt different after that, less hungry for spectacle, more aware of consequence stretching forward. Judge Marquez folded the letter carefully. Mr. Mercer, she said, your life before this night is not irrelevant. It is what makes this night more disappointing, not less. Then she began sentencing. On the count of misdemeanor assault related to Ms. Bell, this court imposes 11 months and 29 days, suspended, with supervised probation for 2 years. On the count of witness intimidation as to Officer Ortega, the court imposes 11 months and 20 nin. days, suspended, consecutive under the same supervision. On misuse of public office and criminal mischief, merged for sentencing, the court imposes restitution in full completion of 280 hours of community service, mandatory grief and anger counseling, and a prohibition from holding supervisory authority in any law enforcement capacity during the term of probation. By agreement entered on the record, the defendant will resign his position as chief of police effective today and surrender department-issued credentials immediately following this hearing. You could hear the room exhale. Justice served, not in fireworks, in structure. But Marquez kept going. The community service will not be symbolic. 100 hours will be served through patient transport and family assistance at St. Matthew's Medical Center Trauma Wing. 100 hours will be served with a victims, transportation, nonprofit assisting individuals who need rides to medical treatment. 80 hours will be served teaching ethics modules, not command modules, at the Regional Police Academy, if and only if the Academy accepts such service, and if he appears as a cautionary example rather than an honored guest. That part made people stare. It was inventive, surgical, merciless in its usefulness. Mercer looked as if he had just been sentenced to live without armor. Additionally, Marquez said, the defendant will issue within 72 hours written apologies to Ms. Bell, Ms. Price, Officer Ortega, and Mr. Benton. Not public relations statements, not legal maneuvers, apologies. They will be reviewed by probation for sincerity and direct acknowledgement of harm. If they are evasive, they will be rejected. That almost got a laugh from the gallery, but nobody dared. Then came the part no one anticipated. Mr. Mercer stand. He did. Turn toward the people you harmed. He turned. Tasha was crying openly now. Evelyn sat straight, hands clasped. Noah looked like he wanted to disappear. Ortega stood too, almost involuntarily, as if some part of him knew this moment mattered beyond procedure. Marquez said, "You will say one sentence to each, today, no excuses." Mercer stared at Tasha first. He looked like a man trying to remember a language he had not spoken in years. "I hit you," he said. "I left you hurting on the ground and I treated your pain like it was a problem for me. I am sorry." Tasha nodded once, no more. He turned to Evelyn. "I damaged your car, disrupted your treatment, and only cared when people were watching. I am sorry." Evelyn's mouth tightened, but she nodded. He turned to Noah, and that was harder somehow. Adults can often take pain more easily than disappointment in a child's eyes. "I taught you the wrong thing about uniforms," Mercer said. "I am sorry." Noah looked down. Finally, Ortega. Mercer's voice nearly failed. "I threatened you because you did your job in front of me. I confused your duty with disloyalty. I was wrong. I am sorry." Ortega's jaw flexed. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Judge Marquez spoke one last time before closing. "Mercy without accountability is permission. Accountability without the possibility of repair is waste. This court will do neither." That was the quote that made even seasoned reporters look up from their keyboards. The hearing ended at 2:03 p.m. But the story didn't. Because what happened outside the courtroom was almost as revealing as what happened inside. When the doors opened, the hallway erupted in flashes and voices. "Chief Mercer, do you regret threatening Officer Ortega? Did you ask for report changes? Do you plan to appeal? Riley, do you still support your father? Officer Ortega, was justice done today?" Bailiff Reed tried to create space, but there wasn't much. Local media vans had packed the curb all morning. People standing outside watched the hallway feed on their phones even though they were 30 feet from the doors. Someone had already clipped Marquez's line about leadership and ownership. The views were climbing in real time. Mercer stopped once in the chaos, turned toward the cameras, and for a second it looked like the old reflex might return. The chin lift. the command posture, the instinct to own the frame. Instead, he looked at Riley. She didn't speak, she just held his gaze. And he lowered his head. No statement, no spin, no angry march to the SUV, no escort into an official sedan. Because there was no official sedan waiting anymore. He had arrived as Chief Daniel Mercer. He left as Daniel Mercer. Sometimes the difference between those two men is the whole story. If you believe that moment would have gone viral even without the cameras, like this video, because everybody in that hallway knew they had just watched power lose its costume. The first 72 hours after sentencing tested whether any of it was real. Public apologies can sound polished and dead on arrival. Mercer's first drafts did. Probation rejected them. Too vague. Too defensive. Too much language about the situation and the unfortunate incident. Too little I, too little you. Too little harm, so he wrote them again. Tasha Bell received hers on cream stationery 3 days later. It was shorter the second time. He wrote, "I have replayed the moment you were on the pavement while I worried about myself. There is no version of that memory in which I look like the man I claim to be. I know an apology does not pay your bills or erase your pain, but I want you to know I see exactly what I failed to see that night. You were a person I hurt, not a complication I needed contained." Tasha read it twice, then put it in a kitchen drawer and told no one for a week. Evelyn Price's letter included a cashier's check for expenses not covered quickly enough through insurance. She called the amount finally appropriate. Noah Benton's letter took the longest to write. Mercer kept starting sentences and crossing them out. How do you apologize to a teenager for teaching him fear? Eventually, he wrote the only true thing he had. "I made you doubt what a uniform means. I hope the people after me earn back what I damaged." Noah showed that line to his mother and said, "At least he knows." Ortega's letter was different. "I resented you for seeing me clearly at the worst possible moment. You were doing your duty. I treated you like betrayal wears a name badge. You were not the problem. My ego was." Ortega read that one in his patrol car before shift and sat in silence for 6 minutes. But written apologies were just paper. The real test began at St. Matthew's Medical Center, Trauma Wing. On October 6, 2025, a little after 7:10 a.m., Daniel Mercer reported for his first service shift wearing plain khaki pants, a Navy volunteer polo, and sneakers instead of Ferragamo loafers. No gold badge on the belt. No department SUV. He drove himself in a used gray Subaru Outback he had purchased after selling the Yukon and covering the remaining restitution balance. The volunteer coordinator, a 50-year-old former Army medic named Paula Kersey, looked him over with zero interest in his resume. "You push wheelchairs?" she asked. "Yes." "You listen?" "Yes." "You take instruction from 23-year-old nurses?" "A beat." "Yes." "Good, follow me." St. Matthew S was the wrong place for performance. Pain is too common there. Every hallway smells faintly of sanitizer and coffee and exhaustion. Every rolling bed reminds you someone's worst hour is happening 10 feet away. Mercer spent the first week doing the least glamorous tasks possible, moving discharged patients, fetching blankets, walking family members to imaging, holding elevators, cleaning transport chairs with disinfectant wipes. At first, everyone knew who he was. Then slowly, fewer people cared. That may have been the greatest punishment of all. No one saluted, no one deferred, no one softened a request because he used to be important. On his third week, Mercer was assigned to help a nurse move a construction worker with rib fractures from trauma imaging to step-down observation. The man winced every time the gurney bumped. His wife walked beside them holding their son's backpack. Mercer kept saying, "Easy, easy," in a voice none of the reporters had ever heard from him. Not command, care. Paula noticed. She said nothing. Meanwhile, at the victim's transportation nonprofit called Miles of Mercy, Mercer spent Tuesdays driving patients to dialysis, oncology, and rehab appointments in a white Ford Transit van that smelled faintly of rubber mats and peppermint gum. On his second route, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw Evelyn Price climbing carefully into the passenger seat. Neither had known the schedule in advance. Mercer froze. Evelyn raised one eyebrow. "Well," she said, settling herself slowly, "looks like the judge was efficient." He almost laughed, almost. The drive to the clinic was quiet at first. Rain flicked the windshield. The wipers squeaked every third pass. Finally, Mercer said, "If you'd rather wait for another driver, I'll call dispatch." Evelyn looked out the passenger window. "No, you got me into this transportation problem. You can get me to treatment." There was more grace in that than he deserved. Halfway there,